Hey YouTube, thanks for tuning in. Part 3 of my WPL C34 build and upgrade series. This part will deal with shock upgrade, what's not that easy. Check this out. So those are the shocks we are talking about, the WLToys metal upgrade shocks for their 1/16 or 1/18 trucks, oil filled, or you can fill them with oil, internal spring, adapted to fit the WPL C34 compared to the original WPL C34 shocks, which are not oil filled and quite jumpy. The C34 frame comes with two possible shock mounts, so for a longer wheelbase or whatever there's a further mount. Maybe they will release a truck with a longer wheelbase soon, I don't know. Maybe a Landcruiser pickup with a longer wheelbase and not as MN models did it, nice pickup with far too short wheelbase. Anyway, the larger opening is to take the original C34 plastic shocks and the screw, and the upper smaller opening is not used. It has 2.5 millimeters in diameter and can perfectly take M2.5 screws. If you use those upgrade shocks, as you can see here, you will lose about half of a centimeter. I don't know what's that in inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch of ground clearance or of height. So the truck will be a little bit lower. I do even like this. I think that's more scale. But if you wouldn't like this, you could probably use shocks that are a little bit longer, or it would even be possible, or easily be possible, to drill a hole a little bit lower and to mount the shock a little bit lower. But mounting upgrade shocks to the C34 is really not easy. There is one problem. What you can see here are the original shocks of the C34, you will know, and the upgrade shocks I used in my C34 now, and there are further nice small upgrade shocks. I do have quite a shock assortment of small shocks for my trucks, but those shocks probably cannot be used, and the shocks I use can only be used with quite a little bit of modifications. The shocks come with ball links out of metal, really nice, but the openings are far too small for the balls of the ball links of the C34. Or the openings of those ball links are even larger than the openings of normal ball links of 1/10 trucks, so that's really a bummer. But that's still not the main problem. The main problem is the thread or the rod. Those upgrade shocks I use now do have 3mm M3 rods. Those shocks do have M2.5s. And now the bummer. The WPL C34 shocks do neither have M2.5 or M3, what would be normal. No, they have a very exotic thread or diameter. They are 2.7 millimeters. You can see here the ball links of the C34, and you see they are not very sturdy, and there's not a lot of flesh or meat around the threads, and the thread is M2.7. I thought of maybe I could use the M2.5 shocks and glue the threads into the plastic because they won't hold in the M2.7, they are M2.5. But then I made a try, and if I want to use the M3 rods of those nice little shocks, you can't only press them in, the bowling will break. So you would have to widen the opening. I thought this will be a problem because not a lot of meat, but anyway I tried it. So what you will need for this, and I had success, is a M3 thread tap, kind of drill, and one of those which do already have the thread at the end of the shaft. So I used this one and I widened the thread of the plastic links of the M34. So here you can see it worked well. There's only a little bit of meat left, but anyway, those links are not the strongest anyway, so we will see if those are a weak point, but widening the thread with such a thread tap worked quite fine. So you have to work carefully, only do it a little bit and then turn it back, put the plastic out, and then a little bit farther and farther and farther, as long as then at one point you will see a little white dot here in the inner part of the opening, and then you are at the end. And it worked really nicely so far. So here you see a finished shock of those metal shocks with the ball link of the C34, and so far it works quite nicely. Mounting the shocks is not that difficult. As already shown, there are several options. You will need I used M2.5 screws, and for each shock, and 2 M2.5 lock nuts and 2 small washers. Perfect length would be 18 millimeters. You can see here you can use button head screws, but even socket head screws. I will show it to you later. Both of them fit. Perfect length in this configuration would be 18 millimeters. Maybe you know what's Murphy's Law. I'll take a look at my assortment of M2.5 screws. You see, I searched for 18 millimeters. I have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16 and 20. Also in this large assortment of M2.5 in the center I have 14 millimeters and 20 millimeters. So 20 millimeter works, 16 millimeter is maybe a little bit short, but it works too. The final assembly you can see here, that's a 16 millimeter socket head screw. 18 millimeter, as already mentioned, would be better. Socket head screw, washer, frame, second washer, lock nut, shock and second lock nut. So far this works quite nice, but anyway it's not the strongest connection. We will see how this holds up. M2.5 screws, maybe they will bend, we will see. Also this connection is not the strongest, but my C34 will not be a hardcore rock crawler, so it will be more a scale trail truck. So I assume this configuration will hold up, and if not, we have to think about further possibilities. I filled the shocks about half full with I have this Tamiya damper oil. It came with one of my Tamiya kits. So far they seem to be right this way for me. So socket head screws do have a larger head than the button head screws, but I told you both will work. And here you can see I used the socket head screws to mount the shocks. With more light it can be seen a little bit better, hopefully. Anyway, no problem mounting the shocks. And mounting the front shocks works the same way, and that's not a problem anyway. There is more than enough room here to take the screws for the new shocks. So guys, upgrade shocks, still a difficult point. I think those WLToys metal shocks oil filled are quite a nice upgrade, but they are for sure not a perfect upgrade. You saw how difficult it is to mount them. You have to make new threads to the ball links of the C34. The C34 comes with a strange diameter shaft of the shocks of 2.7 millimeter. I don't know who had this idea and what's the sense of this. All those small shocks I have to either have 2.5 millimeter as those small shocks or 3 millimeter shafts, and if the C34 shafts or the ball ends would have M2.5 or M3, this would be quite an easy swap out. Further thing is, why do you have those ball links have such large openings for the balls? Even 1 to 10th scroller do have smaller balls to take the ball links, but the ball links of the 1 to 10th are of course much stronger. So compared to the stock shocks, I will show it to you here once again. It is quite a nice upgrade so far. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. The shocks work. Mounting them is quite a little bit of effort, but it works. We will see how they will hold up, and I hope to see you in the next video.